2023 has been one heck of a year for the Nintendo Switch, and despite the fact that it's most definitely beginning to show its age, it has been an incredible year for both AAA games and indie games alike. So here's my top 10 Switch games of 2023 in order. But before we get into my personal list, go into the comments down below and comment your 3 favourite games from the year, and at the end we can see if they match up. We're going to start off with 10th place, and this was by far the hardest spot to fill. And honestly, this could have gone to any number of Switch games. Like originally I had Roots of Pacha in this spot. For a small amount of time, Oxenfree 2 was here as well. But eventually I settled on Dredge. And that's purely because there's absolutely nothing like it on the Nintendo Switch. Dredge is a fishing adventure with a wonderfully creepy undertone. And although I wouldn't consider myself a horror gal whatsoever, the creepiness level is well balanced throughout the game, and although I still wouldn't play it in the dark, it's definitely something I could handle. The beginning of the game starts you off being washed up on a strange island, but the very generous mayor lends you a boat so you can make a living and pay him back by fishing and trawling around the area. But it's not long before you figure out things just aren't quite right around here. Every now and again you pull up a mutated fish from the water. There's also shipwrecks lining every single coast you pass, and should it get dark while you're out in the ocean, you may not like what you see. So it becomes up to you to start unraveling this mystery by trawling across the ocean, each new area filled with new wildlife, new islands, and new locals to talk to. Each of them with stories that will help you figure out what on earth is going on. Now, despite the very sinister undertones, the gameplay loop is actually really rewarding, and was one of the reasons why I struggled to put it down. Because after you spend the day out in the ocean fishing and trawling for treasure, you can then go and sell these goods and use that money to upgrade your boat. This allows you to either fish up bigger and rarer fish, which will get you more money, or allow you to travel and explore even further. You can also research brand new equipment, and if you continue on the story, you'll find yourself picking up these mysterious abilities that, whilst they do help you on your journey, you also wonder how on earth you're doing this. The gameplay loop mixed with the story just made a gameplay experience that was not only a lot of fun, but also really hard to put down. And every new person you spoke to would give you a snippet more of the story, but also leave you with a ton more unanswered questions. So it's definitely a fantastic game, just play it in the daylight if you don't want to be scared. In 9th place, we have Mario RPG. When I first saw this in the Nintendo Direct, I wasn't really that interested in it. I never played the original, so I didn't have that nostalgia factor, and I just didn't think it looked all that good. But I decided to give it a go because so many people spoke so highly of the original that I thought it was worth a shot. And I can honestly say, I do not regret my decision whatsoever. Now, seeing as this is a Mario game, I was prepared for the story to be, well, pretty lackluster, especially for what I expect for an RPG. And honestly, at the start of the game, it definitely seemed to be going that way, considering the protagonist is, well, a giant sword. But what I didn't expect was that every single person in the game seemed to have so much character, delivering in both lore that I never knew existed in Mario and also relationships between the characters as well. And for the first time in a Mario game, I saw everyone as individual characters and not just kind of one playable entity. And although this doesn't have the story depth I'm typically used to for an RPG, I can honestly say I think this is the wittiest and funniest dialogue of any Mario game I've played. And the whole game was honestly a blast, as not only was the dialogue fun, the battle mechanics were also really solid. I've really loved this introduction of timed button presses in RPGs lately, as I find that it keeps me a lot more present in the combat. So I honestly think it's a nice addition, and I love the fact that there are difficulty settings right at the start of the game as well, so it can be enjoyed by people who are RPG and turn-based battle veterans, but also for people just starting off in the genre. 8th place is going to possibly the most underrated game of the entire year, and this is Octopath Traveler 2. I don't really know what happened. I feel like as soon as it came out, everyone stopped talking about it, which is mild considering I think it's one of the best RPGs of 2023. I think one of the biggest factors into why people just stopped talking about it was the fact that it followed the exact same premise as the very first Octopath Traveler, where the game follows 8 separate characters, although these characters are all different from the very first game. Each of them have their own story, their own goals, and ultimately team up with one another to help them out on their very own stories. And each of the characters' stories vary greatly. One of the characters is a thief and a member of a guild. Another character is a scholar wrongly imprisoned for the murder of his entire family. There's also a cleric, an apothecary, and so many more characters with heart-wrenching and incredible stories to follow. And don't get me wrong, I adored the very first Octopath Traveler, but these stories were so much better than each of the stories in that game, in my opinion. The voice acting and the animation of the cutscenes just brought every single character to life. And I love the world building that can be done from hearing 8 different people's life stories. Now, by far my favourite part of the entire game was definitely the stories of each of the characters and their limited interactions with one another. But the battling side of the game was also spectacular. Much like the first game, the music is also incredible and only added to the epic boss battles even more. And thanks to the fact that every boss battle is followed by a good chunk of story, each of the battles you encountered felt rewarding to win. This has everything I'm looking for in an RPG. It runs incredibly on the Switch as well. Honestly, I just wish more people were talking about it. Next up is a very different type of game, and that's Cosmic Wheeler Sisterhood. Now, I'm going to be real, this spot originally had both Cosmic Wheeler Sisterhood and Coffee Talk 2 in it, but eventually I settled on Cosmic Wheeler Sisterhood being just that much better. The Cosmic Wheeler Sisterhood follows the story of Fortuna, a witch who has been exiled on an asteroid for 200 years by her coven, with another 800 years to go. And in an act of pure desperation, she decides to form a forbidden pact with a behemoth, in the hopes of regaining her freedom. And thanks to this pact, you're able to start reconnecting with your witch friends, meet new witches, and ultimately figure out what has been going on in your witch coven over the last 200 years. Other than a few cutscenes, the gameplay itself never leaves this room on this asteroid, but you get to learn all about the goings-on of the entire world around you just by your interactions with fellow witches. Not only is the game's story incredible, but the reason I put this in the top 10 list is just the incredibly unique way you turn out to control the narrative of the story. In a lot of narrative adventures, the story is controlled by the dialogue options in which you pick. But in the Cosmic Wheeler Sisterhood, it's not in dialogue options, but instead how you interpret the cards when you read someone's future. You see, not only do you get to design your very own tarot card pack, you also get given a number of different options whenever you pull a card as to how you want to interpret that card or what you want to say to the character who asked you to read their fortune. And it's only really as the game starts progressing that you start to realize the weight and the gravity to every single one of the fortunes you read. I never would have thought that a witchy political game would be something I gravitated towards, yet to me this is one of my favorite games of the year. The story has so many twists and turns. There were moments where I literally couldn't believe what I kind of made happen just with my decisions. And I love the fact that you're never quite too sure whether what you're saying is a huge game-changing moment or something that just doesn't really matter. It's got a ton of replay value because of the different endings, and to me, this is the perfect game to play before you go to bed. In 6th place, we have Star Ocean. Now, I was in a moment of pure desperation when I stumbled across this game. You see, we were right in the middle of Farmageddon, the 1.5-month-long period where almost every game that was coming out seemed to be a farming sim. So I decided to go through the eShop, go through the recently released section, and try and find a game that just has a bit more substance, because farming sims tend to lack, a half-decent story, and I needed it. Then I came across Star Ocean: The Second Story R, a science fantasy which is honestly way outside of my comfort zone. But then again, almost all of my favourite games of all time have been games that I wouldn't typically have envisaged myself enjoying, but I gave a chance anyway, like the Xenoblade franchise. And I honestly never would have thought that my scrolling through the eShop to find a half-decent game instead made me stumble into one of the best games of the year. The game begins when a young girl, Raina, stumbles across this boy named Claude outside her house one evening. And after a little bit of chatting, she discovers that he's most definitely not from around here, which convinces her she's the person in a prophecy foretold to save her people. Claude, on the other hand, wholeheartedly believes that this has nothing to do with him, and he's just wound up here by mistake. But on his quest to get back home, he decides to help Raina out in whatever way he can. You see, this world has a problem that no one really knows how to fix. One day, an asteroid landed, and ever since, the world has been thrown into turmoil. And the game follows the two as they venture across the land to figure out what on earth is happening. You get to pick between either playing as Raina or Claude at the very beginning, and as such, you get to experience each of their unique perspectives dependent on who you pick. Unlike a lot of RPGs, I found the pacing of this, especially at the beginning, to be fantastic, and I was immediately sucked into the story. But what made me fall in love with this was not necessarily the main story, but something they called private actions. So as you go about the story, you'll pick up a number of different party members as you go. But what makes this game special is how you get to know them. When you go to certain towns or cities, you'll have the opportunity to split away from your party members, allowing them to go across the town and do whatever they want to do in their spare time. And sometimes this will allow you to interact with them one-on-one. And these aren't just small little conversations that help you get to know a character a little better. These are actually full-on interactions that sometimes even contain mini-stories within them. And not only does this let you get to know the character better, dependent on how you handle these different situations that you're in, will determine your relationship with them. Like, for example, with one of the characters in the town, I basically ended up helping them get engaged. You can also have deep conversations about their lives. And how good your relationship is with each of these characters will also determine the ending of the game. So not only are these great to get to know the rest of the characters in the game and not just the main characters, but it's also incredibly important to do them. Thankfully, this does have difficulty settings as well, which is good as the combat took me a little bit of getting used to. As although it's not turn-based, it is definitely very strategic, as you need to time when you do certain attacks. But once I got a handle on it, it was an awful lot of fun. The only thing really letting it down is the skill point system is honestly a bit of a mess. It's needlessly complicated. But all around, this is a fantastic game, a type of game I never would have thought I would have loved, but here we are putting it in this list. It's time for the top 5, and I want you to take this order with a grain of salt, because honestly, I think I could have placed them anywhere in this list and it all would have been equally as valid. But for number 5, we're gonna go with Dave the Diver. I love this game as it basically tricked me into loving a roguelike, a genre which I never thought was my cup of tea, but here we are, and now I want to try even more roguelikes. In theory, the gameplay loop is pretty simple. You jump into the ocean, you catch some fish, you send it to the sushi restaurant, you work a shift selling the sushi, and you use the money you earn to go and upgrade your gear. But oh boy, is this game so much more than just that. You see, whenever you think you're getting a handle on the basic gameplay loop, the game decides to throw you in an extra mechanic to deal with. Because whilst the game starts off with a pretty simple gameplay loop, it's not long before things start getting a bit trickier. Because not only can you start diving deeper and find bigger fish that start to bite back, the game gradually starts introducing brand new mechanics to you. Because you begin to realize that not only is this a roguelike, it's also a full restaurant management style game, and it has multiple storylines underpinning everything you do as well. The restaurant part of the game was by far my favourite, as not only are you the one tasked with catching the fish to serve at the restaurant, you also basically manage the entire thing single-handedly as well. Meaning that you're now in charge of hiring the staff to work at the restaurant, you're also in charge of designing the menu and leveling up dishes as you go, and you also get to decorate it as well. And as you progress through the game, you'll get even more things to do. You'll unlock the ability to go diving in the nighttime, which has more dangerous fish, but also rarer fish as well. You'll also get the ability to farm, not just with a fish farm, but a regular farm for ingredients. And you'll have multiple different storylines all taking place alongside each other. one of which is covering the mystery surrounding your head chef, another one is involving mer people, and the thing that really ties this all together is just the wacky character that the game has. Like, the cutscenes are just absolutely unbelievable, and it always leaves you not only wanting more, but also wondering what on earth is coming next. It's the type of game I think so many people will enjoy. It's also a game I just never got bored of, no matter how many hours I'd put into it. And thankfully, it also runs incredibly on the Switch. In fourth place, we have Pikmin. I honestly never thought Pikmin was the franchise for me. I thought it was just way too stressful, with you being in charge of 100 Pikmin's lives at any one point, and the fact that you also have a timer on each and every day, which if you don't make it back in time, all your Pikmin die. I just didn't think it was for me. But it turns out I was wrong, because I was obsessed with this when I finally gave it a go. And I can finally say I understand the hype surrounding the Pikmin franchise. This is a wonderful blend between exploration and puzzle solving in such a unique fashion. And although there is the occasional battle that makes you tense up a little bit, it's well balanced with the rest of the game and never feels overwhelming. Pikmin 4 sees you follow an SOS signal to an uncharted world, leaving it up to you to find the stranded space travelers and rescue them. But thankfully, you're not alone on this mission. Not only do you have this adorable doggo that follows you wherever you go, you also find these creatures called Pikmin along the way, with each different colour Pikmin being a different variety, each holding their own unique abilities. And the more Pikmin you get introduced to, the more complex the puzzles are as well. And I've got to say, the puzzles were just so satisfying to figure out. Now, one big thing I was worried about was losing Pikmin. And whilst I originally thought I was going to be emotionally connected to each and every one of them, I found out I took a more Lord Farquaad approach to the loss of each of the Pikmins. You know, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. So in the end, it didn't seem to be as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. And the same goes for the time limit as well. Because whilst there is a timer to each and every day, not only does it go pretty slowly, but there's so many different spawn points for your ship that I actually found I was never too far away from it, and wound up getting to my ship way before the day would actually end. Overall, I feel like the small stressful parts that you will encounter, like the boss battles, are far outweighed by the fun that the rest of the game has, of the pure and utter joy of exploring, finding new types of Pikmin, seeing what the Pikmin can do and how they interact with your dog, and the fun of upgrading all your different parts as you go and finding new abilities. So if you're someone who is put off by how stressful you thought it would be, I definitely think it's worth giving a go. In third place, we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Now, when I first saw the price point of this, I really struggled to believe that a platforming game could be worth full Nintendo price. And despite the fact that the game has no story, no cutscenes really, and no character depth, it is probably one of the most fun games I've played on my Switch all year. And I just love the fact that this is old school Nintendo fun, as this can be enjoyed by literally the entire family. Not only is Mario Wonder a technical masterpiece in terms of its platforming mechanics, meaning old school players will love it, with some of the challenges being ridiculously hard, but it's also a game that has simultaneously made platforming accessible to everyone. Like, you can play as the Yoshi characters and then you'll take no damage from enemies, or you can give yourself different badges that help give you a leg up on certain levels you might be stuck on. Another thing that I didn't think I was gonna love but wound up adoring is the multiplayer feature. Because not only can you play with friends, you can also play with random people as well, although they show up in this ghost-like fashion. I didn't really like the sound of playing with random people until I got to a really hard part in a level and found out that everyone was helping each other to get past this point. The cool part about playing multiplayer is the fact that you can help revive other players, which means that you can essentially make sure that none of you die. This added a real community feel to the game, which day one was so much fun to do. But the thing that really solidified this game as being in the top 10 was just how wacky it is. Like, within the first couple of levels, you find yourself in a singing piranha level that was just everything I needed in life. You also get to use the brand new elephant power, which they give you super early on in the game as well, that's both cursed and wonderful. And every course also contains a wonder flower. And the beauty of the wonder flower is you're never really too sure what wacky situation it's gonna give you. It's a platformer that I never tired of, because each world has a slightly unique take on platforming that makes you play the game slightly differently. And I'm surprised to say, I think it is most definitely worth full price. In second place, and just narrowly missing out on first place, is Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars was the winner of Indie Game of the Year, and it honestly, truthfully, really deserved it, as this quite literally packs a AAA punch. And thankfully, it also runs incredibly well on the Switch. This is an RPG that has everything I'm looking for. The story is fantastic, the combat is fun, it has old school boss battles, and almost Zelda-like dungeons to contend with every now and again. And to finish it off, it also has heartfelt interactions between the characters as well. Sea of Stars follows Valerie and Zale, who are known as children of the solstice, and as such have powers of the moon and the sun. And together they set out to rid the world of the evil creations of the alchemist known as the Fleshmancer, a conflict which has spanned generations long before them. But thankfully, this is not a battle they end up doing alone, because as you venture across this world, you'll come across people who eventually decide to join your party. And not only are they incredibly useful to each of the battles you do, you'll also be able to stop and sit down next to the campfire and talk to them all about their lives. And I honestly love the fact that Sea of Stars spends so much time on each of the characters' backstories that you honestly feel like you know them as people. Now, of course, I love the story, but the combat was also great fun as well. Much like Mario RPG, it's based around timed button presses in the combat, which helps keep you present and concentrating. And it's kind of similar to Octopath Traveler 2, in that each of the enemies can be broken by using specific types of attack to break down their shield. Each of the members on your team will have different types depending on their moves, and you can even use combo moves which uses multiple characters at the same time to hit with multiple types of attack at the same time. Much like Mario Wonder as well, they put a lot of time and effort into making sure this game could be accessible to absolutely everyone. Because not only at the beginning of the game do you get to pick what kind of difficulty you're after, but throughout the game as well you can customize your entire experience. Like for example, if you wind up at a boss battle that you're finding too difficult to defeat, then just outside of the boss battle will be a merchant that will sell you tokens that will give you a slight advantage and will help you get past the boss. As after all, a story is only good if you can actually experience it, and I love the fact that it gives players the option to play however they want to. It's a beautiful and breathtaking game, one of my favorite games of the year. If you haven't tried it, I cannot recommend it enough. And then we have first place, surprising absolutely no one, is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This has managed to grab first place because the sheer scale of this should honestly not have been possible on the Nintendo Switch at all. I think it's pure and utter wizardry that this works on the Switch, honestly. And Tears of the Kingdom most definitely deserved to be its own game and not just a Breath of the Wild DLC, as not only does it have a huge story, the map is also ridiculously huge compared to Breath of the Wild. As not only do you have the whole of Hyrule to explore, which is already massive, you have the addition of the depths and the Sky Islands on top of that. And this has essentially become an open world sandbox game, with the building mechanic just being insane. With some of the builds people have done in the game with like literal working robots being incredible. But the thing that really made me realize how fantastic the game wasn't the beautifully gritty story that showed a completely new side of the characters from Breath of the Wild, but instead it was the depth of some of the side quests. And no, I'm not talking about reuniting the Koroks with their friends, although that was an awful lot of fun and one of the things I love doing. I'm talking about a few of the side quests that are not only really long, but have incredible stories alongside of them. Like for example, there's one quest which will eventually allow you to build your whole entire house. There's another quest where you help someone become mayor of the town. And a ton more quests that I probably haven't even found. I love the fact that you can watch 100 people play this game and no one will play it exactly the same. I love how many hidden elements and hidden quests there are. And this is honestly a game that's worth literally every single penny. I love everything they did with this. I can't believe it's even possible on the Switch, and is hands down one of the best Switch games of all time. Although controversially, I think I still like Breath of the Wild more, but I did enjoy how much emotion there was in this story. That's it for my top 10 Switch games of 2023, but if you want to see the 10 games I am the most looking forward to in 2024, click this video here, and I just wanted to say thank you all so much for an incredible 2023.